there's no shortage of tactical RPGs in the indie space, not all of them do their best to stand out, but can Zoria Age of Shattering break that trend? Or does it shatter under its own weight? Let's find out in our full review, but before we go on this noble quest together, why don't you ride your steed on over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. You can gain Discord access to the greatest indie gaming community out there, early ad-free shows, shoutouts at the end of every single video we produce, and even free games depending on the tier. Your new indie gaming community is waiting for you. As I alluded to in that intro, Zoria Age of Shattering is a tactical turn-based RPG, which is strangely single player, even though it looks like it should really be a multiplayer game, and it kind of feels like it should be too. In Zoria Age of Shattering, you control a captain which you will create through the game's excellent Create a Character designer. I get tired of my own face, so Silent Signs was in the room and I said, hey, can I model it after you? And she said, okay, why not? So I made Silent Signs, pretty accurately too, I would say. You'll be able to choose between a pretty decent variety of classes, all with unique abilities and perks, but on top of that, some of them are more difficult to use than others. So I personally chose the Ranger, and that's set at a medium difficulty. I like ranged attacks myself, but if you go with the Sentinel, the Wizard, or even the Priest, they're a little bit easier to use and might be better suited for folks that don't play a ton of these games. There's also difficulty options for the game itself, and those can be changed at any time during your gameplay. The story here doesn't really break any new ground at all. It's fairly entertaining, I guess, kind of par for the course for this genre. You're trying to liberate a kingdom per usual, and that's really about it. You'll pick up a bunch of different quests along the way. It's a big game with a lot of dialogue and some voice acting, which is actually halfway decent.
Getting out of Dag Forom unscathed is a feat, but that doesn't make you immortal.
But overall, the story is really nothing to write home about. What's kind of interesting story-wise here is the fact that this game seems all medieval fantasy, standard fare, and then the robots show up and it goes down this sci-fi route. Wasn't really my thing, a little bit out of left field, but hey, I can appreciate trying something a little bit different. As for the gameplay itself, also no real major surprises here. You are following quests on a very large map. This map, like the rest of Zoria, is kind of okay, but it was easy enough to get confused and lost, bumping into a lot of invisible walls along the way. The game could have benefited from a better compass system or something to lead you down the right path. As you traverse these maps, you will of course run into a good variety of different enemies, everything from skeletons to boars to even goblins. And oh yeah, did I mention robots? Yeah, I don't know. Combat is going to be turn-based, and this is probably a good time to mention that at the time of this review, there was no controller support for this game, so you're going to want to use mouse keyboard. I'm not even really good with mouse keyboard normally, but it was perfectly fine for this game. So anyways, typically speaking, your character will get 2 actions per turn, and you usually have a squad of other characters with you. These are what the game refers to as your action points, and there's also a focus bar. This will help you to launch your special abilities, as well as use other skills. Just like any other RPG, there's tons of buffs, debuffs, and of course these can affect you as well as your enemies. The actual menus work pretty well for these battles. It was easy enough to get rid of my poison or whatever else affected me, and it was easy enough to dish out the damage too with a click of a mouse. It takes a little while to get used to things, but overall, you'll adapt pretty quickly. However, I will say the game is quite hard, so I was thankful that I could drop the difficulty at times. It was even challenging on the normal setting, for me personally. This of course could be because I started with one of the harder classes, lucky me. So if you're the type that loves getting a lot of different equipment to try out and stats, you're in luck with Zoria because there's tons of different stat points that you can earn, and they can be distributed in a variety of ways to really build a character that you want. Honestly, there's so much to do in this game that it got a little confusing, and I didn't even realize I could upgrade my stats till much later on. After a couple hours of gameplay, I was like, damn, I'm not getting that much stronger, and then I stumbled through it on the menus. The game doesn't always do the best job of teaching you every single little detail that it offers, but there is a lot here to delve into, including alchemy, there's cooking, and you can rest as well. Depending on who's in your party and how long you rest, you'll get some neat bonuses. All told, none of the systems are that hard to understand. There's just a lot to it. So I would say if you haven't played a lot of these style of RPGs before, you might want to know what you're getting into. That said, I don't really see this as a title a lot of novice players are going to be picking up in the first place, so you'll probably be just fine. If all of that weren't enough, you'll also eventually unlock an outpost, and you can manage that as well. There's lots of upgrading you can do to what essentially becomes your hub base. You'll be able to rearrange your party, you can buy and sell goods, and there's even more quests to take on. Who would have thought? For those outpost-specific missions, you can send out certain members of your party to go and do your dirty work for you, and they might bring back some cool bonuses for you. One important element to know about this game is that your equipment will actually be shared between your party, so that does make things a little easier to manage. However, that equipment can also break, and I know how a lot of you feel about breakable equipment in games. That can get a little bit annoying. Zoria does encourage building a party that works well together though, so you will have to experiment quite a bit in order to find that party. You'll need to mess around with different formations in order to get the pattern that best suits you. And of course, you have to have the right skills and the right upgrades if you really want to dish out maximum damage. So all told, I'm more of a moderate tactical player myself. I enjoy the genre, but I don't consider myself an expert in it. And yeah, some of the systems did overwhelm me, but I eventually caught on with everything well enough. I'll tip my hat to the developers because they've done a really good job allowing players to customize and tweak the game and play it how they want to play it. And actually, the visuals here are not half bad. Some of the environments have nice lighting. It's a bit of a bleaker setting for the majority of your gameplay, but there's some brighter sections as well. All told, there'll be lots of rainy environments. Some of the textures look a little low res to me. Sometimes, again, it could be frustrating to hit those invisible walls, but it's certainly not a bad looking game. It is a bit zoomed out, so you don't see all of the character details. Definitely not going to win any Game of the Year awards for visual design, but serviceable. The game did have a few weird bugs and glitches here or there, but nothing that broke the game. The frame rate was actually really solid throughout, which was impressive enough for a game that's pretty expansive and large. Yeah, a few random characters kind of popping up out of nowhere, stuff like that. I was told that the developer will be releasing a day one patch, so hopefully some of that will be ironed out, but nothing, again, too bad. The sound design, however, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I actually really like the compositions. They're great orchestrated pieces that fit the game quite well, but there's some weird audio hiccups here or there that kind of pulled me out of the experience. Again, these could be patched out potentially, but there were some very large audio spikes from time to time, and the voice acting didn't really mesh well with the soundtrack. It all just seemed a little bit poorly mixed, and the songs would also change really abruptly, which was kind of odd. Even still, as far as visuals and audio go, I've seen and played a lot worse. And that kind of sums up how I feel about Zoria Age of Shattering. It's not a bad game by any means, it just doesn't really break any new ground, and my biggest criticism would probably be the fact that it's not multiplayer. I think that's a very odd decision for a game that could have really benefited from partying up with some friends. But still, if you like your tactical RPGs with plenty of systems and lots of hours of gameplay, you could definitely do a lot worse. So in the end, I'm going to award Zoria Age of Shattering the Bronze Genie Lamp of Approval.